celebrated as his country's player of the century. His timing and placement were sublime. His integrity and his love for the game transcended politics and self-interest. A batsman of rare genius, Graeme Pollock is one of ESPN's legends of cricket. It was literally South African cricket's finest hour, Durban, 1970. In the hour after lunch on the first day of the second test, Graeme Pollock and Barry Richards added 103 runs.
I remember vividly what happened the first session of that test match in Durban in 1970. Barry Richards scored 94. And the ground, it was Barry's home ground, so the ground was abuzz with the name Richards. A wicket fell in that last over. Graeme Pollock came in at number 4. And there was 3 or 4 balls to face in that over. He whacked a couple of 4s, and then at the end of the over he sort of stood and leant on his bat.
It was one of those sessions that happened every now and then that Barry had played so well, and I think when the Aussies came out after lunch they weren't over positive as what was going to happen. And I remember, I think my first delivery from Alan Connolly was a half volley outside off stump, so I got it quickly with a 4, and that set it up.
And I remember saying to Keith Stackpole, who was next to me in the slips, I said, "We got a problem." And Stacky said, "What's the problem?" I said, "He's going to see how many runs Barry Richards gets, and then he's going to double it." I was wrong. Barry Richards got 140 and Graeme only got 274.
Pollock went on to make 274, at that time the highest test score by a South African. He was a master batsman at the height of his powers.
Graeme Pollock will go down as one of the greatest left-arm batsmen that I've had the pleasure to watch. When he got in, he took full control. He could turn a game. He was a tremendous player. Awesome when he got going, awesome.
He had terrific style and was a very big and powerful man and could tear bowling attacks to pieces. And again, a cricketer who, for world political reasons, was never able to flower properly. But I mean, I've seen him play often, and he was a great player.
Pollock had a beautifully simple technique, and his judgment of length was instant and almost infallible.
I just think that people get a bit over-technical, and I just basically, my basic was, as long as you balanced and your head is still and you watch the ball, that you've got a good chance.
I think he's a bit like a Viv Richards type player. You know, he never, and Gary Sobers, they never relied on bat pad and things like that. Graeme just put his foot down the wicket and hit it.
Graeme Pollock's probably the second best batsman that I ever saw. Very aggressive, very strong through the offside, magnificent timer of the ball. And probably the other thing I remember about him was very hard to beat in the flight with spin bowlers. He was a great player.
He had this sort of easy, casual approach to but his technique was so correct and so good, and his timing was absolutely perfect.
I think he's right up there with Sobers as far as a batsman's concerned, easily. He's got an incredible average. I mean, whatever they threw at him, Graeme Pollock handled. He had a slightly different technique, although it was incredibly aggressive. You know, he spread his legs, he stood there, and he just seemed to be able to hit it in the middle of the bat. He had this very heavy bat he used as well. I mean, he was using a 3-pound bat when everyone else was using a 2.5-pound bat. Very thin handle, just a wonderful player to watch.
Graeme Pollock was playing first-class cricket at 16. he made his maiden century for Eastern Province at 16 years and 335 days of age. At that time, the youngest man to make a Currie Cup century.
I played our school first side when I was 13, and they played in the men's first league, which was unusual. So I was playing in men's cricket from 13 years old. I was a fanatic for Australian cricket, and I've always backed them from day one. And the guy that really, to me, was someone that I followed was Neil Harvey, left-hand batsman for Australia, who got so many runs against South Africa. And I think, to me, it was like a challenge that's what I'd like to do for South Africa. And he was my role model, without a doubt.
In March 1963, Pollock made 209 against an international Cavaliers team that included Australian Test bowlers Richie Benaud and Graham Mackenzie.
Before they came to Australia in 63-4, my last year, I took a Commonwealth side to South Africa, and Graeme Pollock played then. He made double 100 against us in Port Elizabeth. I said to Ron Roberts, our manager, I think we're going to have a bit of a problem with this guy out in Australia.
The innings made Pollock at 19 and 19 days, the youngest South African to make a first-class double century. Later that year, Pollock was selected for the South African team to tour Australia. After failures in the first two tests, he made a century in the third.
I was under pressure then. I'd have got 25, and then I think I got 2 and 16 in Melbourne, second test. So, you know, when you're 19 years old and you're on a tour, and it's not a great start. So I think I was under pressure, but I'd got 100 against New South Wales in Sydney, and they virtually were like another test. They had a test side, and Richie Benaud and all these guys were playing for New South Wales. And I got to 100, 120, I think it was, in Sydney. So, I mean, obviously that made a huge difference.
In the fourth test in Adelaide, Pollock made 175, adding 341 with Eddie Barlow.
Eddie got 200, I got 175, and you know, we put on the 341. But I think maybe the point you don't realise, and I think Eddie, in fact, at a function a few months ago at Kimberley, said, you know how long we batted for to get 341? And I had no idea, and he said, yeah, we batted for 280 minutes.
There's no doubt that through that 63-4 series in Australia that Pollock demonstrated that he was a great offside player. People compared him to Hammond as a great offside player, but there was a suspicion that he might have been weak around leg stump.
I always felt he had a weakness around leg stump, but at the same time, his offside play, I think he was as good a player on the offside as any I've ever seen. You know, there was no shot he couldn't play, but it was just his awesome power.
After making 137 at home against the English tourists in 1964-65, Graeme Pollock went to England with the South African team in mid-1965. In the second test of the series, he played the standout innings of the tour. After South Africa had made 5 for 80 on a difficult wicket, Pollock made a dominating 125.
In 65, he played one of the great knocks I've seen on a pitch at Trent Bridge, uncovered, and just like plasticine it was. The rain had got into it. The ball was hitting and stopping, and no one could play a shot. They were shaking their heads and can't play a shot on that rubbish. He went out there and made 125 and didn't hit a ball other than in the middle of the bat, and they just rocketed to the boundary.
I think we were 12 for 2 and then about 40 for 4. And then I think Peter van der Merwe, I think we put on a few runs. You know, it's a funny thing. It's hard to say how you go about it. I never really went in with any preconceived ideas. If you look at the whole test in perspective, that it was significant and that we won the test, and it was a wicket that the seamers had bowled well and sides didn't get big scores. So I think in that context, it was probably the best innings I've played.
And I don't suppose you would see another innings from any batsman ever without a single blemish. There was not a single blemish that I can remember in that innings. It was just perfect. He was such a wonderful judge of length. You never saw Graeme go forward and then come back, or go back and then have to come forward. He just had the absolute length of the ball judged, and he played his shot. And he was hitting this ball with ferocious power. And I think, in terms of pure cricket, I think that's the best innings, technical innings I've ever seen.
The final delivery from Hawke is sent to the boundary by Pollock. But even before it reaches the fence, enthusiastic crowds scramble over the pickets to congratulate their heroes.
In 1966-67, South Africa enjoyed its first victory against Australia in a home test, and Pollock was a key player. He made 537 runs at an average of 76.71, including a double century in Cape Town.
The importance of that tour for South African cricket fans was colossal. They saw a victory over Australia as being very important if they were to affirm their status as, you know, one of the leading, if not the leading side in the world. In actual fact, Australia had never lost a test in South Africa before that series.
A single brings him his century. Today's his birthday, and what better present for Graeme Pollock and cricket lovers everywhere than 100 runs.
Well, by the time the series was over, South Africa had won the series 3-1, and Pollock had just about cemented his place as the #1 batsman in the world. And he did that more than anything else with an innings of 209 in the second test at Cape Town. The great irony of that is that's the one test of the series that South Africa lost.
Pollock's perceived weakness around leg stump had now disappeared, and he was now as complete a batsman as any in world cricket.
When it came to batting, as a youngster, when I first appeared on the scene, Graeme Pollock was the bloke that I ran into from time to time. And I'd seen him play, of course, and seen what he'd done to sides like the Australians. And I felt a little sorry for Graeme, because I don't think he gets the sort of accolades that perhaps he should.
In South Africa, he'll always be regarded as a legend, and he'll always be regarded as somebody, along with Barry Richards, probably the best batsman of that era, of that time that South Africa produced. So it's just a pity that he wasn't able to carry his skills into the professional arena, because the professional game came along when South Africa, when they were in isolation, so he could never really take part in that. So the world didn't see the best of him. In South Africa, they probably did, although it was more at first class level, because they couldn't really see him against other countries, which was a great pity. But there's no question that he was a highly skilled player and a highly talented individual.
South Africa did not play Test cricket again until that famous series against Australia in 1969-1970. Apart from his extraordinary 274 in the second Test in Durban, Pollock made 3 other half-centuries, and the South Africans won 4-0.
In 1969-70 for South African cricket was in many ways the high point of their whole involvement in the international game. They absolutely thrashed an Australian side led by Bill Lawry 4-0, and it was generally regarded that that was perhaps the strongest South African side ever to take the field.
And then, at the age of 26, Graeme Pollock's Test career was over.
He was trapped by the apartheid policy of his own country, and the world turned against him and put him out of the game. And like, of course, so many players in the war as well, they lost 5-6 years. Otherwise, I think he would have probably broken nearly every record in the book.
I think all of them would have had long international careers and distinguished careers, and I think it affected them quite badly emotionally, as one would be able to understand. To see everybody else around the world playing, and see a lot of players playing who they knew they were better and a lot of the people playing at international level hurt them badly. And it was very emotional, it was very difficult. It was something that I don't think a lot of them could really come to terms with, which is pretty sad. But it was a reality, and as I said, it was a very dark time in South African sporting history, the 20 years of isolation. It meant that a whole generation of players was lost to the international arena.
If isolation meant changing South Africa's politics, it's cricket, it's isolation, if it played a part, then I'm quite happy that I missed out on 22 years.
After touring England and then Australia with composite world teams, Pollock settled into life as a domestic first-class cricketer at home. Pollock's only taste of international cricket from 1970 onwards came against rebel touring teams.
He has said that he was going to retire after the rebel West Indies team in 83-84. But when word got out that there was a rebel Australian team coming, he decided to extend his career, which gave it a nice symmetry because, of course, his Test cricket career had begun against Australia back in 63-64.
Pollock's last great innings came in February 1987, in his last 5-day match against a rebel Australian team led by Kim Hughes. At 42 years of age, Pollock made 144, with 40 of his last 41 runs coming in boundaries.
He scored an innings of 144, and for the most part, once he settled in, he did most of them with boundaries, either hitting fours or taking singles, which, as one journalist at the time who saw the game said, he only took singles so he could keep the strike. And it was, by all accounts, a great innings. He was 42, approaching 43. And he got those runs against a pretty fair bowling attack. And he got them in great style, well past his 40th birthday.
Pollock never played in a one-day international, but he once made 222 not out in a 60-over match for Eastern Province.
There'd be plenty of bowlers who would be very happy that Graeme Pollock never played a one-day international because he would have been dynamite. I mean, it was just made for him. You know, he actually played Test matches if they were one-day internationals. You know, the way he hit the ball through the offside field in particular. I mean, I've seen fields set for Graeme Pollock, and I did it myself, where you know have a ring of 6 or 7 fielders on the offside, and Graeme Pollock hit the ball through that area.
Pollock retired in 1987 with a record 12,409 runs in Currie Cup matches. At an emotional ceremony in Cape Town in 2000, he was named South Africa's Cricketer of the Century.
A selection panel sat down to select South Africa's greatest cricketer of the century. And Pollock was named that person, and everyone commented, and it is without a doubt that the selectors had as easy a job of picking their #1 cricketer as Australian selectors would have had picking their #1 cricketer. Just as Bradman was very, very clearly the greatest Australian cricketer of the 20th century, so too Pollock was the greatest cricketer of South Africa.
Pollock's simple yet devastating approach to batting continues to influence South African cricket today.
I said to John T, you know, the more runs you score past the bowler, it tells you that you're playing well, that you're playing straight. And I remember he got 100 at Lord's a couple of years ago, and I saw him after the test, and he said right through his innings, it went through his mind the whole time. He tended to play too square, and obviously, I mean, he laid himself open. And he just said, every time I hit one past the bowler, I thought to myself, you know, I can't be playing badly.
The highlights packages of Graeme Pollock are always kind of his whole innings almost. I mean, I think he hit a lot of boundaries. I don't remember him scampering too many singles, but that's the kind of player that he was. I think he found the gap really, really well. I remember the talk he came and spoke to the South African side, and he just said, it's vital that if the guy bowls you a bad ball, it must go to the boundary. And judging by what I saw, the highlight packages of him, well, any half decent ball, what didn't even have to be a bad ball, but most of the time he kind of pierced the gap and made sure the ball got to the boundary. I'm really glad that he's back and involved, because I think he's got a whole lot to offer South African cricket, and we'd be the poorer for not having utilised that and tapped that.
Although Pollock continues to inspire the next generation of South African cricketers with his approach to batting, his training regime is unlikely to survive the test of time.
Graeme Pollock was probably the Doug Walters of South African cricket. He was always there to sit around and have a drink with at the end of the day's play, and I don't remember seeing Graeme run any more laps at the Oval than Doug Walters did.
I must say, I just saying how when I see these guys sort of running around and pre-game training, it really it doesn't make sense to me. My whole thing is that as a batsman, as long as my eye was sharp and if I did go and have a net or whatever it is, I'd have a bat for 5-10 minutes. I mean, to run around the field was just way out of line. And I just thought I had to conserve energy, hopefully believing maybe I'd spend some time out there. And I just think it's overdone today, I really do.
Continuing the Pollock cricketing dynasty is Sean Pollock, Graeme's nephew.
That whole Pollock family, there's quite there's definitely a passion for the game, and Peter and Graeme and now Sean as well.
He was great to watch, made you real proud as a family member. And I think going by what people have said about him in his youth and even in the latter part of his career, he was an exceptional batter and one that everyone enjoyed watching bat.
Graeme Pollock played in 23 test matches. He batted 41 times for 2,256 runs at an average of 60.97. Of all test batsmen to play 20 or more innings, he has a batting average second only to that of Don Bradman.
It's often said in cricket that statistics can lie, and to a degree that's true, but it is impossible to downgrade the importance of Graeme Pollock's test batting average. Only 4 men in the history of the game who've played more than 20 test innings have averaged more than 60, and Graeme Pollock is one of those 4. You've got Bradman right up there at 99.94, but then you've got Pollock running second at 60.97, then Headley, then Sutcliffe above 60. And underlining Pollock's greatness is the fact that he only played 4 test matches after his 23rd birthday. I wonder if he'd been given the opportunities that some of his contemporaries had got, just how many runs he might have scored, what batting average he might have finished with. In a sense, perhaps we didn't see all the Graeme Pollock at test level that we could have, and perhaps his stats might have been as clearly ahead of the rest of the field as Bradman is ahead of everyone else.
To bowl to, almost impossible. Just almost impossible. So Graeme Pollock up there, as far as I'm concerned, with the very best ever.
Graeme Pollock did play, fortunately, 22 test matches. So he had some sort of a career in international cricket, and a very good one. But then that career being curtailed at the age of 26, when he was probably heading into his prime, would have been a massive blow for him. He was a little bit of a different personality to Barry Richards. I think maybe he dealt with it, I wouldn't say better, but maybe a little bit easier. And he was able to continue and to play first-class cricket and seem to get satisfaction out of that.
I've no doubt that Graeme Pollock would certainly have been one of the greats had he played as much Test cricket as all the others who were listed in that regard.
The tragedy is that, because of circumstances, he never had the career that others have had. To think that all those wonderful years of his youth and that were missing from Test cricket is a tragedy, because he would have been ranked with anybody.
The fact that he won such universal acclaim in such a short international cricket career is indicative of Pollock's superior batsmanship, and it is for his sublime timing and his destructive, dominating batting that Graeme Pollock ranks amongst ESPN's legends of cricket.